Class, back to our imperialism unit here. What you see obviously is a blank map of the globe. And here I've highlighted what we covered in the reading last night. First, of course, is Hawaii, and you know exactly how America annexed Hawaii. I talked about that in my last video. As well as Cuba, Puerto Rico, and then the Philippines, which are possessions that America is going to take control of during and after, and sometimes for a longer time for some of these countries, and sometimes shorter, after the Spanish-American War from 1898 to 1900. That will be our topic for next class, but right now I want to talk more about American diplomacy, but big stick diplomacy, more carefully here with this map here. So I guess mostly what we're focusing on is over here in the Western Hemisphere. And of course, if you remember from 1823, President Monroe issued the Monroe Doctrine, which basically alerted European powers from staying out of the Western Hemisphere. And what Teddy Roosevelt, and where we get this quotation, speak softly and carry a big stick and you will go far, comes from Teddy Roosevelt. And he adds a corollary, which is sort of an addition to the Monroe Doctrine in 1904. And if I boiled that down to 2 bullet points, it's that the U.S. has the right to oppose European powers in Latin America, and that the U.S. has the right to intervene in the domestic affairs of its neighbors. And I'll read you a little piece of what Roosevelt wrote to give you a sense for exactly how he believed America's role in the Western Hemisphere should be carried out. Quote, "It is not true the United States feels any land hunger as regards the other nations of the Western Hemisphere save such as are for their welfare. All that this country desires is to see the neighboring countries stable, orderly, and prosperous. Any country whose people conduct themselves well can count upon our hearty friendship. The nation shows that it knows how to act with reasonable efficiency and decency in social and political matters. If it keeps order and pays its obligation, it need fear no interference from the United States. Chronic wrongdoing or impotence which results in a general loosening of the ties of civilized society, however, may in America, as elsewhere, ultimately require intervention by some civilized nation. And in the Western Hemisphere, the adherence of the United States to the Monroe Doctrine may force the United States, however reluctantly, in flagrant cases of such wrongdoings or impotence, to the exercise of an international police power. While our southern neighbors obey the primary laws of civilized society, they may rest assured that they will be treated by us in a spirit of cordial and helpful sympathy." So obviously he goes out of his way to say that as long as the Western Hemisphere acts in a civilized way and pay their debts and keep continuing the Monroe Doctrine of keeping Europe out, then everything is well. But if not, they're going to have a problem. So this is Roosevelt's policy towards the Western Hemisphere, as well as what I said earlier, which is his quotation of "Speak softly and carry a big stick." And the best way to portray that is with his ordering of the cruise of the Great White Fleet. So in 1907, Roosevelt sent the United States Navy, around the world to show the rest of the world how big his stick is if other nations want to tangle with the United States. So obviously Roosevelt means business, as he's adding on to the Monroe Doctrine with his own little corollary, and he's basically saying that if you're not doing what the United States expects, and obviously that this is all rhetoric, so they can twist that however they'd like, they will get involved. And what we're going to see is that happens a lot. So the first of these that I want to talk about is in the Dominican Republic. After a revolution in the Dominican Republic, the United States takes control of the debt that the Dominican Republic had accrued from Europe, purposefully to make sure that the Dominican Republic would pay off that debt and Europe wouldn't be showing up in the Western Hemisphere in the Dominican Republic. So the United States takes control of the tariff duties in the Dominican Republic and sends 45% of that to the Dominican Republic, the rest of that back to Europe to pay that debt that makes the United States nervous. So that's one case. Another is here. This is what we now know today as Panama, which was, of course, part of Colombia before Panama became a country, and it became a country because of this. At first, there was a French group that was building a canal across Colombia, which the Isthmus of Panama, which is right here, the goal was to create this canal so that naval ships didn't have to go around South America. They could go right through here. And the French, for many reasons, lack of funds, disease, etc., get really tired of building this canal, and the United States tries to purchase the land from Colombia. They offer them 10 million and flat and 250,000 a year, but Colombia rejects that. They ask for a lot more than that, and this really bothers Roosevelt. What happens is Roosevelt not necessarily Roosevelt himself, but the United States communicates with France to get control of this, and the French agree to help create a rebellion down in Colombia in this area, which is how we get Panama. So the United States lands Marines and supports the rebellion here and asks for a new country to be here called Panama. And in return for their help in creating the country of Panama, the United States gets this this area of land that they build this canal upon, and the canal opens in 1914. It starts in 1904. Obviously, the American side of it, the French had already started, and it isn't turned back over into Panama until 1977. So the United States owns it for a very long time. The next one I want to talk about is actually fits in closely with this one, which is in Nicaragua, which is right here. So the president of Nicaragua is very angry about how the United States got control of the canal and creating a new country. So the president of Nicaragua threatens to sell some land to Japan and or Germany to build their own canal to compete with the United States and to gain some allies across the Atlantic and Europe. And this really bothers the United States. Again, this goes back to the Monroe Doctrine of keeping Europe out of the Western Hemisphere. And so the United States sends Marines to basically instigate a rebellion and overthrow the president. 2 years later, when there's another revolution and overthrowing of the president, the United States lands even more troops to support a new president who's in favor of United States interests, which is something we're going to see again and again in this recording. So that's Dominican Republic, Colombia, Nicaragua. Next is Haiti. This is the country of Haiti here, bordering what we were just talking about, which is the Dominican Republic. And Haiti had a very unstable start of the 20th century here, and they had 6 presidents over the course of 4 years. The United States does not like the instability down here, and establishes a military government in 1916. And again, similar, sending Marines down to the capital of Haiti after there's a coup. And then, of course, the significant note from this is that the troops last until 1934. So it's a really long time that the Marines are in Haiti trying to keep it stable, right, which fits in with the Roosevelt corollary, obviously, very well. And then the last note is the United States troops sort of helped draft the Haitian Constitution of 1918, which is a very interesting way to consider creating your own governing documents with the help of foreign troops. The next of this group was we're going back over the Dominican Republic, which is in a coup in 1916. The United States threatens the Dominican Republic and land troops who begin an 8-year occupation. So there's an 8-year occupation of the Dominican Republic, and obviously there's a much longer occupation in Haiti. So you can tell how the United States is expanding its influence. And then the second last of these is, I forgot about the Virgin Islands, is the Virgin Islands. So these 2 islands here and this one were purchased by the United States. This is the island of St. Croix where I wrote this text. Woodrow Wilson purchases the island of St. Croix, St. John, St. Thomas from Denmark for $25 million in 1916 because he feared that the Germans would use these islands for submarine bases. These islands are still United States territories today, but it just shows you how paranoid, if you will, the United States was about European influence in the Western Hemisphere. And then lastly is the big country here of Mexico. And Mexico is a very more confusing, controversial story. The Mexican Revolution is a very long revolution. I gave you a couple quick bullet points of some of the major turning points. So we see the revolution flip. In 1910, we see the leaders flip from Diaz to Madero. But when Madero gets to power, the United States decides that they don't really like this guy, so they back a revolution. They help this guy, Huerta, overthrow Madero with support, obviously, from mostly weapons. But then when Huerta comes into power, he's in close negotiations with Germany, which bothers the United States, and so the United States secretly backs a few other revolutionaries who are trying to overthrow Huerta. And when one of them, Carranza, comes into power, and won't negotiate with the United States about how they want to set up their constitution so that the neighbor to the south of the United States is, civilized, or however Roosevelt would have put it in his corollary. When that doesn't work out, the United States supports someone else, and this is Pancho Villa, and Pancho Villa is famous because he actually eventually attacks the United States in New Mexico, which is altogether sort of an insignificant point in American history because shortly thereafter the United States is in World War I, and so they're not necessarily worrying what's going on in revolutionary Mexico. But Mexico will come back into play when World War I starts heating up and the Germans try to get the Mexicans to attack the United States, but that's a story for another day. So all in all, what I'm trying to teach you guys today is that obviously this is a sort of a shotgun teaching of a few of these events that are quite significant, but I only portray them in such a quick manner to sort of portray this overall point, which is that the Monroe Doctrine and now the Roosevelt Corollary and Teddy Roosevelt's precedent of big stick ideology has made the United States into a very aggressive imperializing force, although of course they're doing it with their own rhetoric of sort of democracy and civilization and freedom, and exactly what I read to you from the Roosevelt Corollary at the outset of this video. So next class we'll talk about the Spanish-American War, where America gets more imperialistic, which is with the globe that I showed you with the red countries, where we get a hold of Cuba and Puerto Rico and Philippines. When you add that to all these green countries we just studied, you could tell that America was looking externally at the turn of the 20th century as well. And now you know why, and this will lead us into World War I, which will be the topic for our class after the Spanish-American War.